These are the words from the proposed revision to Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, which does not sound interesting, I can see that, but this is what it speaks about. It speaks about some of our highest held common values. The ones we're focusing today, justice and equity. This is what the proposed language says. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregation, our association, and society at large. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. Justice and equity. I forgot we said that we were going to put this on the front of every order of service when we talk about this, because it's actually very helpful to see. My apologies. If you're new, this is a graphic that illustrates the values of Unitarian Universalism that are being proposed as being part of our guiding documents. So I'm going to pass this around here in the sanctuary just so you can look at it, but we're talking about all these words some point throughout the year, and this is a horrible teacher practice to pass out something and then continue talking when people are going to look at it, but I'm the one who messed up and put the wrong photo on the order of service. So we're going to talk about justice and equity. Friends, I'm going to take a breath and invite you to join me if you'd like. What is beloved community? We use these words in our mission statement here at this congregation. It's used in the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, 8 of which are around our walls here in our sanctuary, and it's listed in this proposed language. So a refresher course, the UUA is the parent denomination of this congregation, and they have bylaws like any nonprofit. In the bylaws is this theological language that sounds kind of like beliefs, but we're also very clear you don't have to believe any specific thing to be a part of this congregation or this denomination. But it's very theological language. And they are proposing new language for this space in the bylaws because the old language is now 40 years old, and lots of things have changed in 40 years, especially perhaps how we want to practice being people of faith. Okay? So this term, beloved community, there's a long history to this phrase. It's first used by Josiah Royce when he was talking about a condition of a community, a group of people, especially when it came to the idea of reconciliation, of doing conflict resolution, of being their highest selves. He said the beloved community is a community that allows what he calls grace and loyalty to the community to become its highest self. That people are working on themselves and on their community to be the best version of themselves. It was popularized by Dr. Martin Luther King, who spoke about the beloved community, and his influence came from Howard Thurman, who we have often quoted. And this is the important part. For these folks, beloved community was not meant to be a vision of heaven in the clouds, of a world somewhere far off, but it's supposed to be a practical possibility for humanity here on earth. It was a spiritual and realistic goal. The beloved community was a place where love and justice were operating in everyday life, where people of all identities are equal and included, and where conflict is solved by nonviolent means of reconciliation. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about beloved community, right? It's not pie in the sky somewhere far off. It's a practical possibility that you could build here, where love and justice operate together. Everybody with me? What kind of love is that? We talked about that in January. Love with a capital L, what Dr. King and many others called agape love. The term that is used in these bylaws might be liberating love, love that liberates, love that calls for transformation, for giving up the needs of the self in order to protect and support the community, perhaps. Sometimes that's giving up privilege, sometimes that's giving up position, sometimes that's giving up your bodily safety. to help support those in your community who need your allyship. And this love needs justice to be at work. Meaning, not just that everyone gets what they deserve equitably, but when we fall short of building our beloved community, there's a process of restoration or reconciliation. The founders of this congregation were called restorationists. They believed in love and justice working together. And they spoke about, in their Christian language, they said, everyone goes to heaven, because they're universalists, right? Eventually, everyone goes to heaven. But if you were like really, really bad, you might need to spend some time in like the penalty box situation, right? You might get a yellow card, take a little time out before you join everyone else. That was the process of restoration. And they believed in this, not because they wanted to focus on the idea of punishment, of evildoing, not because of the necessity of divine punishment in their eyes, but because of the absoluteness of love and justice. Because love, justice, and equity working together, because of the inherent worthiness and dignity of every human being, meant that the community moving on towards its highest self was the most important thing. In Royce's terms, only the community could do the work in the act of restoration, of reconciliation, of healing when one of its members kind of wanders outside the boundaries. That you couldn't personally work your way back into right relationship or into the covenant of the community, the way that we say we're going to be together. You cannot Ayn Rand personal responsibility your way into heaven, contrary to what many believe. Dr. King viewed beloved community as the healing antidote, the balm in Gilead for society's problems. And he based his nonviolent resistance, of course, in this practice, and talked about the need for transformation in his language. Transformation not just of individual hearts and minds, but of the nation, right? He looked at the systemic problems beyond just how people treat one another, but also the ways in which voting rights are still discriminated against, the way in which women are treated more poorly, the way in which people of color are marginalized. This was all part of the denial of personhood that was viewed as one of the sins of the nation. And I think that's a pretty good word for the kind of oppression that we see in all of its forms. But for King, your personhood was not just from your inherent worthiness and dignity. It was also connected to your place in the community. That being a part of a loving community was a part of your identity. Whether it was the beloved community fully actualized or a community on the path to being a beloved community. Or if it was what was called the anti-community. A community where capitalism, militarism, and racism denies the full personhood of some in favor of others. Does that sound familiar to anyone? He called this committee treason against the ideals of the beloved community, betraying love with a capital L, and creating this rift, this separation in need of redemption or restoration. I don't know that any of us need reminders of how that rift happens and continues to happen every day. So the question for us as people of faith, as people of the Unitarian Universalist persuasion is, what do we do about it? Is there a role for us to play? Because whether or not we are affected by that history, perhaps genetically, epigenetically, based on the color of our skin or where our ancestors are from, whether or not we have been intentional parts of causing harm even today, that kind of trauma is passed on in various ways, some of which we start the healing process by doing some of the somatic work, some of which we start to heal by saying words of love and affirmation and singing songs of hope here in community, and some of which we have to do a little bit deeper work. And this is where it gets tricky, especially if you look like me. Because justice and equity sound great. And of course, I want everyone to have what they need. But if that means that I need to give up something so that somebody else in my community can have what they need, that's a little bit trickier. We're in talks of trying to share some daycare spots for our children, and it is wonderful being friends with other parents and learning how to navigate this. And then when you start talking about putting money into a collective pot and how much and when and all those things, it starts to feel a little prickly. That it is part of what Dr. King called the sickness of living in our society that affects all of us, no matter what our skin color looks like, no matter our orientation, no matter our religious tradition. So if King is right, and my identity is partly based on my community, this community, the community of Philadelphia, the community of my home state of Texas, which has lots of problems, the community of America, we ask this question: is there a sickness that needs healing in our community? Even if we feel like we're in a loving, progressive, safe space, which we are, even then, what does justice call for us to do? And if America is somehow broken or sick, then how can I not be? And the members of our community who are people of color are continuing to face oppression. How does that not affect me? How can it not? The only option is whether I choose to acknowledge that or not. There's a TV show called Ted Lasso. It's on Apple. It's about a soccer coach, an American football coach who goes to England to coach soccer. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite shows. There's a... I can't decide how much background to give you. It's a soccer team, right? And soccer teams in Europe often have logos that they're sponsored by corporations on their chest. So you get very funny logos like companies called Kazoo and Hollywood Bets and things like that that are just, you think it's the name of the team and it's not. It's very confusing for an American. And there's a space in the show, an arc of one of the players who is from Nigeria. And he's becoming a good player, and he finds out that the sponsor of their jerseys is contributing to environmental harm in Nigeria. And he talks with his dad, and he says, I don't want to lose my spot, but I can't in good conscience go out there and play. And his dad says, do what your conscience is telling you to do. Follow your values. And so he puts his jersey on, and he asks for some tape, like athletic tape. And he covers up his logo. And it's this very powerful scene, and everybody's kind of watching him like, what are you doing? You can't play like that. We'll get fined, or you won't be able to play. The referee won't let you play. And one of his kind of antagonist teammates, they're always butting heads because they're both kind of the best players on the team, who is a white person. They've had this antagonistic relationship, and he sees what's happening, and he comes over and he stands right in front of him. And you think there's going to be this big confrontation. And he holds out his hand. He says, give me the tape. And he starts to cross his own logo off. And everybody's like, what is happening? This white guy has never acted like this before. And he sits down and he says, we're a team. We all got to wear the same jersey. And everybody else covers up their logo, and it becomes this incredibly powerful movement. We're a team. No matter where we come from, we all got to wear the same jersey. That is a communalist message, as we say in Unitarian Universalism, that is antithetical to the personal responsibility, your way out of problems, theology, and philosophy that I grew up with. And for many Americans, especially white Americans, especially Eurocentric minded Americans. That's a hard value to live up to. Maybe you feel that way. But if it is not possible to personal responsibility your way out of systemic problems, if in fact no matter how much love and affirmation we give to ourselves and one another here in this space, if that does not travel out into the world, are we a part of the balm in Gilead? And regardless of our intent and our intentions, our impact is not perhaps what it should be to be called beloved community. That there is definitely a place for building beloved community here in these walls. But then the idea is that it goes everywhere. It spreads. And then here's the second part. In calls for justice and equity, it is only the wounded parts of community and the beloved community that do the restoration work, that do the healing work when there's conflict. It is not the people who may not realize that they're causing harm. It is oftentimes not the people in power who have the ability to do the restoration work. It has to come from within the community. And that's a form of emotional labor that we often ask of our marginalized folks without a lot of return on investment. I have found that oftentimes my friends are so willing to give grace and compassion, and they're so very tired. So that puts it back to me. And one of the most helpful things for me to think about justice and equity and love and compassion, liberating love, has been a framework called reparations. Many of us are familiar with this word, and oftentimes we think about it in terms of cash payments to descendants of enslaved African people here in America or other places, right? We often think about it in terms of money. And that's a part of it, but that's not the only part of it. And there's a group here who's been working on reparations, what that means for this community, not just as a spiritual practice, but in terms of practical building beloved community actions that we could do, that we could participate in. To think of reparations not just as cash payments to try and mollify the guilt of a nation, but a total restructuring of society that would solve our problems, that would be the antidotes to militarism, capitalism, and racism. So this could be passed by law. Good luck. Because, as we've seen, anything that causes the slightest bit of discomfort gets labeled something like communism or critical race theory, perhaps. And I get that. Because, quite honestly, sometimes I feel that way too, right? Sometimes the discomfort that I feel when being called back into a relationship, when I kind of stray outside the bounds, when I say something that was less than loving, when I think that I can solve this and tell you all how to do it because I'm the minister and so I know better. And a white guy. As my beloved mentor, Reverend Dr. Chaplain Robert Rennicks, said, McKinley, every movie and fairy tale story you've ever seen stars a character like you. How could you not think you're the hero? Oh my God, yeah. But the truth is, I cannot not only fix myself, heal myself, or the community by myself, right? It takes all of us, and sometimes it takes me listening, sitting back, saying less, listening to the people who are most affected, and then being willing to do what they say. That is part of reparations, too. Not just thinking that I know the best way. Not trivializing or denying someone else's experience. Putting my money where my mouth is. What's required for reparations to work is the courage to give up comfort and security. Maybe giving up the neighborhood I want to live in. Some of my free time. Some of my safety. That is what agape love, liberating love, that is what it calls us to do in pursuit of justice and equity. To build a beloved community, to create a beloved community where everyone is seen and recognized. That might mean seeing less of me at the front. And that can be scary. That can be scary. From our story, seeing this community of people calling for change in ways that might make you feel a little uncomfortable. Mama, are they going to hurt us? No. They're inviting us to join them. Friends, you are invited to join in building the beloved community, to engage in reparations work, not just in terms of how we spend our money, although that is a part of it, but also how we think about ourselves, both as individuals and as a community, to think about the problems in society that we want to be a part of the solution, and to ask ourselves, how am I a part of the problem? And start there. To share vulnerably, to build love and trust here in this space, and then let it go out in the world. So if you're hung up on money when we talk about reparations, slight aside. Because there's a very real possibility that our reparations project will involve giving money, perhaps directly to people. And that can be uncomfortable for some of us. I get that. And a very helpful reframe in reparations. Money is energy. It is a store of energy. We work to earn money, putting our energy into something, and we receive money in return, and then we give it to other people for their labor, for their energy. It is the confluence and the flow of energy. And there are different kinds of money and different kinds of energy. There's guilt money, when you feel guilty about something. There's resentful money, when you feel resentful, like, oh, he's going to pass the plate again. They need new lights in the sanctuary and a new sound system. Okay. Oh, the Democrats are emailing me again. Okay. Yes, this is the most perilous time in history. Okay, $5. There's gratitude money, there's joy money, and then there's the best kind of money. Love money. Agape love money. Liberating love money. The kind of money that goes to heal the rift. The kind of money that is freedom, that is relationship, that is expansive from its source, that pours from its source into the world and transforms it. That's what reparations is based on. The transformation of society. Your resentment money, your guilt money, your shame money, it does not transform society. We have tried. They're the wrong kind of energy. When we think about infusing these stones on Sunday mornings, when you think about making donations of your time, your energy, your money, where's it coming from? What is the source? If it's coming from that love, capital L, liberating love, that is at the center of all we do, and it is part of works of justice and equity, that has the power to transform the world. Everything else is limiting. So if you're feeling like I feel, like, oh, these problems are so big, I don't know what I can do. Here's the good news. You can't do it yourself. Nothing you can do as an individual. But we, this we here, and the greater we, if we are in need of restoration, we need reparations. If we are in need of beloved community, we need restoration. And there can be no restoration without reparations. There can be no justice and equity in a beloved community without reparations, without the healing of what is sick. I know this requires vulnerability. I know it requires using language that might be hard for some of us. I know it requires courage. But keep in mind, when we think, are they going to hurt us? No. We are being invited to join in the building of beloved community with our love money and our love, and our love everything. Could we all say amen? Amen. Blessed be. May it be so.
Now is the time when we take up our offering of financial resources for the good of this community. Ushers, please go ahead and start the passing of the plates here in the sanctuary. We know that there are many ways to give back to this congregation, and we encourage you to find a way that works for you. Find a committee you might really enjoy being on. Or become involved with RE. There's so many ways that you can give of your time and love. For giving of financial support, for that liberating love support, your money or checks put in the plate will be used to fund the ministries of this church. And any pocket change or other money that you designate for change, online or by putting them in the white envelopes in the pews, will be sent to this month's selected Change for Change organization, Iman. More info is on your screen about how to give. Please know that if this is your first time with us, there is no expectation that you give anything other than a contact form, which may be yellow or white or pink, because they come in assorted colors right now, or letting us know how you found us and how we can support you. The offering will now be gratefully received. As we get ready to extinguish our chalice